At 10:47 a.m. on Astoria Riverwalk, the rope tore through his hands, but his German Shepherd wasn't watching the waves. It was staring at the container and growling at something inside. Ethan froze. Then came a faint metal knock from within 10:47 a.m. The tide was coming in faster than it should have. Waves rolled hard against the edge of Astoria Riverwalk, slamming driftwood and foam against the pylons with a hollow, pounding rhythm. The sky hung low, the kind of gray that pressed down on your shoulders. Wind carried the sharp sting of salt and diesel from the docks. It smelled like something unfinished. Ethan Cole leaned back into the pull of the rope, boots digging into wet gravel. The line cut across his palms, already raw, already split in two places. The old nylon rope had numbers stamped into it. 3/8 inch, faded blue, but it was fraying near the knot. He knew it wouldn't hold forever. He pulled anyway. The container shifted in the surf, barely. A red slab of steel, rusted at the seams, heavy enough to drag a boat under if it caught wrong. It rocked once, then slammed back against the water with a deep metallic thud. Ethan adjusted his stance without thinking. Feet wider, knees bent, weight low. The way they taught you when the ground might disappear under you. The rope jerked. His right hand slipped. The line snapped tight across his palm and tore the skin open like paper. Blood mixed instantly with salt water. He didn't react, just shifted his grip and pulled again. No wasted motion. Behind him, Shadow didn't move. The German Shepherd stood 10 feet back from the waterline, muscles locked, head angled slightly to the left. Not watching the waves, not watching Ethan, watching the container. Ears forward, tail stiff, a low, steady vibration in his chest that wasn't quite a growl, not yet. Ethan glanced back once. Quick, a habit. Check your 6. Easy, he muttered, breath short. It's just scrap. Shadow didn't blink. Another wave crashed. Harder this time. Water surged up past Ethan's boots, soaking his jeans to the knee. The cold hit fast, biting through fabric, climbing his legs. He ignored it. The container drifted closer by maybe 3 feet. That was all. But it was something. He pulled again. And then it happened. A sound. Not the water. Not the rope. Not the hollow boom of steel hitting waves. Something sharper. A faint metallic click from inside the container. Like something shifting. Or tapping. Ethan froze. Just for a second. His hands stayed on the rope, but the tension in his arms changed. His head tilted slightly, listening the way he used to listen in the dark, when every noise meant something, or nothing, or everything at once. The wind picked up, rattling a loose sign down the boardwalk. A gull screamed overhead. Somewhere behind him, a truck door slammed near a bait shop on Marine Drive. Normal sounds. But not that one. He waited. 3 seconds. 4. Nothing. Ethan exhaled slowly through his nose and pulled again, harder this time, like he could drag the doubt out with the weight of the container. Shifted cargo, he said under his breath. That's all. But his grip tightened. Shadow took 1 step forward, then stopped again. Another wave hit. The container lifted slightly, just enough to reveal a darker strip along its bottom edge. Barnacles, seaweed, something tangled and black. It slammed back down with a heavy groan that echoed through the water. Ethan felt it in his arms. The rope creaked, fibers stretching. He shifted left, angling the pull, trying to bring the container toward a shallower patch he'd spotted earlier, about 20 yards down, near a broken section of rock where the tide didn't hit as hard. He'd mapped it out already. Always did. Think before you move. Shadow's growl deepened. Not loud, but different. Ethan looked back again. Longer this time. The dog's eyes were fixed on the container door. Not the sides. Not the waterline. The door. A gust of wind cut across the river, sharp and sudden. It rattled the loose metal latch on the container's side. Clack! Ethan's jaw tightened. There it was again. Same sound. From the door. He let the rope go slack for just a moment. Not enough to lose control. Just enough to listen. The water surged in. The container rocked. Clack! Something inside shifted again. Ethan's fingers curled slowly around the rope. The pain in his hand caught up all at once, a hot, throbbing pulse that ran up his arm. He flexed once, testing grip. Still good. Probably debris, he said, louder now, saying it like it made it true. Tools, chains, something loose. Shadow barked. Sharp, sudden. One burst. Ethan flinched. Not much, just a twitch. But it was there. His shoulders tightened, breath catching halfway in his chest before he forced it out again. The reflex came fast, too fast. Rotor blades, sand, heat. He blinked. Back to gray sky, cold water, Oregon coast. Shadow moved closer this time, not all the way, just enough to put himself between Ethan and the container. His body angled slightly, weight forward, ready. Ready for what? Ethan followed the dog's line of sight. The container door sat half submerged, rust streaks running down from the hinges. One latch hung crooked, bent inward. The other was still locked in place but loose enough to rattle with the motion. Clack. The sound came again. Not random. Not quite. Ethan's breathing slowed. He shifted his weight, easing tension off the rope without fully letting go. His eyes tracked the edges of the container, scanning for anything out of place. No markings he recognized. No fresh paint. No shipping codes clear enough to read. Just faded letters and numbers, half erased by salt and time. Something about it felt wrong. Not broken. Wrong. Shadow's growl dropped lower, almost silent now. A warning that wasn't meant for noise. Ethan swallowed once, throat dry despite the damp air. He wiped his bleeding hand against his jacket, leaving a dark smear across the canvas. Then he tightened his grip again. Just get it to shore, he said. Then we'll see. Simple plan. Always start simple. He leaned back and pulled. The rope went taut. The fibers stretched. For a moment everything held. Then snap. The sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. The rope split clean near the knot, whipping forward with violent force. Ethan stumbled back 2 steps, boots slipping on wet gravel. The loose end lashed across his forearm, leaving a thin, red line that bloomed instantly. The container lurched. Freed from tension, it drifted sideways, turning just enough for the door to face the shore, directly. Facing him, facing Shadow. The latch rattled once more. Clack! And then a pause. Longer this time. Ethan didn't move. Neither did the dog. The river went quiet in a way it shouldn't have. The waves still moved, the wind still blew, but something in the rhythm shifted, like a gap in a heartbeat. Ethan took one slow step forward. Shadow growled, louder now. Easy, Ethan said, but his voice had dropped. Lower, tighter. Another step. Water soaked into his boots again. Cold, immediate. The container rocked gently, almost calm now, as if settling. Ethan's eyes stayed locked on the door, waiting, listening. Nothing. No more sound. No more movement. Just steel, water, wind, and that feeling. The one that crept in without asking. The one that didn't need proof. Ethan exhaled slowly. Something inside, he muttered. He didn't finish the thought. Shadow already had. The dog stepped forward, placing himself just ahead of Ethan, eyes never leaving the container. Ready for whatever came next. But nothing came. No sound. No movement. Just the slow push and pull of the Columbia River brushing against the steel. The container drifted inches at a time, turning slightly, then settling again like it had decided to wait. Ethan didn't wait. He stepped back first. One step, then another, creating distance without thinking about it. The same way he used to clear a doorway, never standing in front of it longer than he had to. Shadow mirrored him. No leash, no command, just instinct. They both moved up the gravel slope until the waterline sat 10 yards away. Far enough. Ethan wiped his hand again, slower this time. Blood mixed with sand, turning dark and gritty across his palm. He flexed once. Pain shot up his wrist. Still usable. Not today, he muttered. The wind carried his voice off toward Marine Drive. No one answered. He turned his back on the container first. That mattered. Walking away from something you didn't understand always did. He didn't like it, but he did it anyway. Shadow didn't. The dog stood facing the water, ears locked forward, watching that red steel box like it might stand up and walk. Let it go, Ethan said. Shadow didn't move. Ethan exhaled once, sharp through his nose, then started up the path toward the parking strip along the Riverwalk. His boots left wet prints on the cracked pavement. Each step felt heavier than it should have. Shadow followed after 3 seconds. No more. No less. The Ford F-150 sat where it always did, angled slightly toward the curb like it might leave at any moment, but never did. 1998 model, faded green. Oregon plates, 7KJ-2149, one headlight dimmer than the other. Home. Ethan opened the driver's door and paused, one hand on the frame. He scanned the street out of habit. Left, right. Reflections in the glass of a closed cafe across the way. A white delivery van parked 2 spots down with a dented rear door. Nothing out of place. He climbed in. The seat springs creaked under his weight. The smell inside was a mix of old coffee, damp fabric, and something metallic that never quite went away. A folded receipt sat on the dash. $4.83 from a gas station off Highway 101, dated 3 days ago. He didn't throw it away. Shadow jumped into the passenger side without waiting. Settled low, still watching the water through the windshield. Ethan shut the door. Silence dropped in. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ethan reached for the glove box, pulled out a small roll of gauze and a strip of medical tape. His hands worked automatically, wrapping the cut across his palm tight enough to stop the bleeding. Not neat, just functional. He finished in under 20 seconds. The way you do when you've done it before. A gust of wind hit the truck broadside. The whole frame shuddered slightly. Something loose rattled in the bed. Metal against metal. Clink. Ethan froze. His head turned slowly toward the back window. Nothing there. Just an old toolbox, a length of chain, and a rusted crowbar he'd picked up behind a marina dumpster 2 months ago. He stared for a second longer, then forced himself to move. Wind, he said. Quiet. Flat. Shadow didn't react. That was worse. Ethan reached for the ignition, turned the key halfway. The engine coughed once, then caught, settling into a low, uneven idle. The dashboard clock flickered, 11:12 a.m., before stabilizing. He let it run. Heat would come later. For now, he just needed the noise. The steady vibration filled the cab, pushing back against the silence. It helped. A little. He leaned back in the seat, eyes closing for just a second. That was all it took. Rotor wash. Heat slamming down from above, sand in his teeth. The radio crackling, contact front, someone yelling coordinates he couldn't quite hear. Ethan's eyes snapped open. His hand moved before he could think, reaching for something that wasn't there. A rifle. A sidearm. Anything. He found the steering wheel instead. Cold plastic. Oregon. Not Afghanistan. He forced his breathing down. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Slow. Controlled. Shadow shifted beside him. Pressed his head lightly against Ethan's arm. Not pushing. Just there. Ethan didn't look at him. "Yeah," he said. "I know." Outside, a gull landed on a nearby railing. Watched the truck with one eye, head tilted. The river kept moving. The container sat where it was, half-turned, door facing the shore. Waiting. Ethan reached for a bottle of water wedged between the seats. Took a long drink. The water tasted like plastic and salt. He swallowed anyway. His gaze drifted back to the river. He could still see it from here. That red shape against the gray water. Out of place. Too clean in some spots. Too intact for something that had been out there long. Containers didn't just drift in. Not like that. He tapped his fingers once against the steering wheel. A habit. Counting something only he understood. 1, 2, 3. Decision. He killed the engine. Silence came back fast. Too fast. Shadow's head lifted. Ethan opened the door again. Cold air rushed in. "You stay," he said. Shadow didn't move. Ethan stepped out, closing the door behind him with a soft click. He didn't slam it. Never did. Noise carried. He walked back toward the edge of the Riverwalk, slower this time. Not pulling. Not forcing anything. Observing. The container hadn't moved much. Maybe another foot closer. The tide was still working in his favor, for now. He crouched near the edge, resting his forearms on his knees. Watched the water move around the steel. Look for patterns. That's what they taught you. Something caught his eye near the lower edge of the container. A darker patch, just above the waterline. Not rust, not seaweed. A dent, fresh, edges sharp. Metal bent inward, not out. Ethan's jaw tightened. Impact from outside would push it in like that. Something hit it, hard, or something tried to get out. He shook his head once, dismissed the thought before it could settle. "Cargo shifts," he said again. But he didn't sound convinced. Behind him, a car passed along Marine Drive, tires hissing on wet pavement, normal life moving on like nothing had changed. Ethan stayed crouched a moment longer, then stood. He looked at the container one last time. Really looked. Every line, every seam, every place something could be hidden, or break, or open when it shouldn't. Something inside moved. The words came back without asking. He turned away again. This time he didn't stop halfway. Back at the truck, Shadow was already standing in the passenger seat, front paws braced against the dashboard, eyes locked on the water. Waiting. Ethan opened the door. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I saw it too." He climbed in, shut the door, and sat there for a long second without starting the engine. The river moved, the container waited, and somewhere between the two, something didn't add up. Not yet. But it would. 1:18 p.m. The tide had shifted. Ethan stood at the edge of a gravel turnout just off Fort Stevens State Park, boots planted in damp sand, watching the river bend where it opened toward the Pacific. The wind had picked up, colder now, cutting through his jacket like it knew exactly where to press. The container was closer, not by chance. The current had carried it along the shoreline, dragging it slowly toward a shallower stretch where broken rock jutted just beneath the surface. A natural trap, the kind of place debris collected when storms let go of what they were holding. Ethan had seen it before. He checked his watch. 1:19 p.m. Then he looked again. The red steel mass rocked once, then settled. The angle was different now. The dent he'd noticed earlier sat just above the waterline, clearer in the afternoon light. Fresh, sharp edges, not eaten by rust yet. Recent. Shadow moved ahead of him, paws silent against the sand. The dog didn't run, didn't rush, just walked a slow arc along the shoreline, nose low, tracking something Ethan couldn't see. Ethan followed at a distance. Spacing. Always keep spacing. The air smelled different out here. Less diesel. More salt. More kelp, something faintly sour like old rope left too long in the sun. The kind of smell that stuck in your throat if you breathed it in too deep. Shadow stopped. 10 yards from the water. Ethan stopped too. The dog didn't look at the container this time. Not directly. His head tilted slightly, nose lifting, catching the wind. Then he stepped sideways. One step, then another. Moving along the curve of the shore instead of straight toward the target. Flanking. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Yeah," he murmured. "You see it too." He adjusted his path, mirroring the dog's movement. No straight lines. No direct approach. The kind of angle that let you see more without being seen. Except there was nothing here to see them. At least nothing he could spot. They moved for maybe 30 yards before Shadow stopped again. This time, he pawed at the ground once. Hard. Sand kicked up, damp and dark beneath the surface. Ethan stepped closer. "What is it?" Shadow didn't answer. Just shifted his weight and looked toward the container again. From this angle, the door sat slightly off to the right, half submerged, the latch hanging crooked. And something else. A thin line ran from the lower edge of the container into the water. Not rope, not seaweed. Too straight, too deliberate. Ethan crouched. His knees cracked softly as he went down. He leaned forward, squinting against the glare off the water. The line disappeared beneath the surface about 6 feet out. Could have been nothing. Could have been debris caught during the storm. Or it could have been attached. He reached for a stick, driftwood, about 3 feet long, and extended it toward the water. Tested the depth first. Shallow. Maybe knee-high at most. He stepped in. Cold hit fast. Same as before, worse now with the wind. The line shifted slightly as the current moved around his legs, not anchored, floating. He nudged it with the stick. It didn't drift away. Instead, it pulled taut for a second, like something on the other end resisted. Ethan froze. The stick hovered just above the surface. His breathing slowed, controlled, each inhale measured like he was back in a place where noise mattered more than anything. He nudged it again. This time the line moved, slid along the side of the container, and vanished under the door. Connected. He stepped back out of the water without turning his back. One step. Then another, never rushing. Shadow watched him closely, body still, eyes sharp. Ethan dropped the stick onto the sand. "Not scrap," he said quietly. The words sat there between them. He wiped his hands on his jeans, smearing old blood and river water into the fabric. The cut on his palm had started bleeding again. He didn't notice. His eyes stayed on the container. If that line was attached inside, then whatever shifted earlier wasn't just loose cargo. It was connected to something. Something with weight. something that resisted. Shadow let out a low growl. Ethan nodded once. Yeah. He walked back toward the truck, faster now, but not careless. Every few steps he glanced over his shoulder, checking the shoreline, the tree line, the empty stretch of sand that ran along the park's edge. Nothing moved, but the feeling stayed. At the truck, he reached into the bed and pulled out the rusted crowbar. It felt heavier than it should have, or maybe his hand just wasn't steady. He tested the grip once. Good enough. Shadow jumped down from the passenger seat before Ethan even opened the door, landed soft. No sound. They walked back together. This time there was no flanking, no slow approach. Ethan headed straight for the container. The tide had dropped another inch or two, exposing more of the lower edge. The dent stood out now, catching light along its bent seam. Close up, it looked worse, like something had struck from the inside, not the outside. He stopped 2 feet from the door, close enough to touch. The latch hung loose, rust flaking off in thin strips. The hinge above it creaked softly as the container shifted with the water. Ethan raised the crowbar, paused, listened. Nothing. No click. No shift. Just the river and the wind. He slid the curved end of the bar into the gap near the latch and pushed. Metal groaned. The sound echoed off the water, louder than it should have been. Too loud. Ethan stopped, waited. Still nothing. He adjusted his grip and pushed again, harder this time. The bar slipped once, scraping against rusted steel, sending a sharp screech into the air. Shadow barked, short, urgent. Ethan flinched, not much, but enough. The sound bounced around his head, twisting into something else for a split second. A crack, a shot. He blinked. Back here. Now. He tightened his jaw and forced the crowbar back into place. One more, he muttered. He leaned in, using his weight this time, not just his arms. The metal gave a fraction of an inch. Then another. The latch shifted. Clink. Ethan froze. That sound didn't come from the latch. It came from inside. A second later, something thudded softly against the inner wall. Not loose, not random, deliberate. Ethan pulled the crowbar out slowly. Shadow stepped forward, placing himself just off Ethan's right side, close enough to touch, far enough to move. The container door creaked as the water rocked it again. Clink. Another sound. Closer now. Ethan's grip tightened around the crowbar. Something's in there, he said under his breath. Shadow already knew. The dog's body lowered slightly, weight forward, muscles coiled tight like a spring. Ready? Ethan didn't open the door. Not yet. He stepped back once, then again, creating space, reassessing. The tide would keep dropping for another hour, maybe more. The container wasn't going anywhere now. It was caught. So was whatever was inside. Ethan turned his head, scanning the horizon one more time. Empty shoreline. No cars. No movement along Highway 101 beyond the distant hum of traffic. Alone. For now. He looked back at the container, at the dent, at the line disappearing beneath the door, at the latch he'd almost forced open. Then he lowered the crowbar to his side. Not like this, he said. Shadow didn't move. Ethan took one slow step back, then another. The wind picked up again, rattling the loose latch against the steel. Clink. This time, it sounded almost like an answer. Ethan didn't turn away immediately. He stood there, watching, measuring, waiting for the next sign. Because whatever was inside, it wasn't done yet. 2:42 p.m. The sky had shifted again. Not darker, Not lighter, just flatter. The kind of gray that erased depth, made everything look closer than it was. Ethan stood beside the open tailgate of the F-150, staring at the tools laid out in front of him, like pieces on a board. Crowbar, short-handled hammer, a pair of work gloves stiff with salt, a coil of thinner rope newer than the one that snapped, still had a barcode sticker half peeled. $11.79 from a hardware store in Seaside. He picked up the gloves, turned them once, put them on. Shadow sat a few feet away, facing the shoreline, unmoving. The dog hadn't taken his eyes off the container for more than a second since they got back. Ethan noticed, didn't say anything. He grabbed the crowbar again, then reached into the cab and pulled out a small flashlight from the center console. Black casing, scratched near the lens. He clicked it on. Still worked. Good. He shut the truck door with his elbow. No slam, just a soft click. Then he started walking. This time, he didn't stop halfway. The sand shifted under his boots as he moved down toward the waterline. The tide had pulled back another foot, exposing more of the container's lower edge. The dent now sat fully above the water, jagged and wrong. Closer, it looked worse. Edges bent inward, not crushed. Forced. Ethan slowed at 10 feet, then 5. Shadow moved with him, staying just off his right side. Not ahead, not behind. Beside. They stopped 2 steps from the door. The latch hung loose, rocking slightly with the motion of the water. Rust flakes drifted off each time it tapped against the steel. Clink. Ethan didn't react this time. He raised the crowbar, slid it into the seam again. The metal felt colder now, harder, like it had settled into place while he was gone. He pushed. Nothing. He adjusted the angle, braced one boot against the lower edge and leaned his weight into it. The bar groaned against the steel, scraping rust loose in thin curls that fell into the water. Then a shift. Small, but real. Ethan froze. Listened. Shadow's body tightened. From inside, a dull thud, followed by a faint dragging sound, like something heavy moving across metal. Ethan's jaw locked. He pushed again, harder. The latch bent outward this time, metal stretching with a low, painful groan. The hinge above it creaked, resisting, then giving just enough to widen the gap by half an inch. Air escaped. Not a rush, just a slow leak. It smelled wrong. Not rot, not decay. No sweet, sick smell of something dead. Metal, oil, and something else. Something he recognized but couldn't place. Ethan leaned back slightly, breathing through his nose. The scent hit deeper that way, sharper, familiar. Shadow let out a low growl. Ethan nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "You smell it too." He shifted his grip and drove the crowbar deeper into the seam. One more push. The metal gave. A sharp crack snapped through the hinge, loud enough to echo off the water and bounce back at them. The door jerked outward an inch, then 2, then stopped, caught on something inside. Blocked. Ethan stepped back instantly. 2 steps. 3. Creating space. Shadow moved with him, body low, eyes locked on the gap. Nothing came out. No movement. No sound. Just that smell. Ethan waited. 5 seconds. 10. The wind picked up, pushing against the partially open door. It creaked, trying to swing wider, but whatever blocked it inside held firm. He moved forward again. Slower this time. Measured. The crowbar stayed in his right hand, the flashlight in his left. He angled his body slightly to the side, not standing directly in front of the opening. Never stand in the doorway. He reached the edge. Stopped. Listened again. Silence. Ethan lifted the flashlight. Clicked it on. The beam cut through the narrow gap, slicing into the darkness inside. At first it showed nothing. Just shadow. Then shapes. Rectangular. Stacked. Secured with straps that had shifted slightly out of alignment. Military-grade tie-downs. Not the cheap kind. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He pushed the door another inch with the crowbar. It resisted, then slid a fraction more, scraping loudly against whatever blocked it. The gap widened, enough to see. Inside, crates, dark green, reinforced corners. Markings faded but still visible in places. White stenciled numbers, partial codes. He leaned closer. The smell hit stronger now. Oil, preservative, and something chemical. Clean, controlled, not random cargo. Organized. Shadow barked once, sharp. Ethan flinched again, smaller this time, but it was there. The sound echoed too close to something else in his head. Something louder. He shook it off, focused. The flashlight beam moved across the interior. Medical kits. Stacked along the left wall. Hard cases. Military issue. He recognized the shape before he saw the markings. Then, a patch. Cloth. Stuck to the side of one crate, half torn, edges frayed. Ethan's hand tightened around the flashlight. He leaned in. The beam steadied. The patch came into focus. Tan background, black stitching, a shape he knew without needing to read it. His unit. 75th Ranger Regiment. Ethan didn't move. For a long second, he didn't breathe. The river kept moving outside. The wind kept pushing against the door. Somewhere in the distance, a truck horn sounded along Highway 101. But inside that container, everything went still. Shadow stepped closer, pressing against Ethan's leg. Not pushing him forward, not pulling him back. Just there. Ethan swallowed once. Slow. Careful. His eyes moved past the patch, deeper into the container. More crates. More markings. Some newer. Some older. All wrong. None of this belonged here. He shifted the flashlight slightly, and the beam caught something else. A strap, pulled tight across one of the crates, not fixed, moving, barely. Ethan's breath stopped halfway in. The strap twitched, just once, then went still. The sound followed a second later, a faint scrape, from deeper inside. Ethan pulled back instantly, 2 steps, crowbar raised. Shadow dropped low, teeth bared now, a low growl building in his chest. The door creaked again as the wind pushed against it. The gap stayed open. Dark. Waiting. Ethan's voice came out quieter this time. Something's alive in there. He didn't question it, didn't argue with it. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just cargo anymore. 3:16 p.m. Ethan didn't go back in right away. He stood outside the container, just off to the side of the door, breathing slow through his nose, letting the wind cut the smell down. The crowbar hung loose in his hand. Not dropped. Never dropped. Just lowered. Shadow stayed tight against him, shoulder brushing Ethan's leg every few seconds like a quiet check-in. Still there. Still moving. Still alive. Inside, nothing moved now. No scraping. No shifting strap. Just the dark opening and the crates stacked beyond it, silent again, like they hadn't made a sound at all. Ethan glanced down at his watch. 3:17 p.m. Time mattered. He ran a quick scan across the shoreline, same as before. Empty stretch of sand. No parked cars near the turnout. No figures along the tree line. A fishing boat moved far out on the water, engine low and steady, heading north. No eyes on him. That didn't mean anything. He stepped forward again. Slow. Controlled. The flashlight came up first. Not his head. Not his body. Just the light. He angled it inside, sweeping left to right without crossing the threshold. Crates. Secured. Medical kits. Tie-down straps, some slack, some pulled too tight. The beam paused on the ranger patch again. Ethan's jaw tightened. He leaned in just enough to widen his view. The door scraped another inch open as he nudged it with the crowbar. Whatever had blocked it earlier had shifted back slightly. More space now. Enough to step in. He didn't. Not yet. Instead, he dropped to one knee at the edge and reached in with the crowbar, hooking the handle of a loose bag sitting just inside the threshold. Canvas. Dark green. Zipper half open. He pulled it toward him. The bag slid across the metal floor with a soft scrape. Nothing lunged out. Nothing followed. Ethan dragged it fully outside and let it rest on the sand. The fabric was soaked in places, stiff with salt. A torn tag hung from one side. Faded black letters, almost gone. He set the crowbar down beside him. Opened the bag. Inside. Plastic sleeves. Waterproof. Stacked tight. Ethan pulled one free and held it up to the light. Documents. Typed. Stamped. Some pages had water stains creeping in from the edges, but most were intact. Preserved. On purpose. He flipped to the first page. Shipping manifest. Coordinates. Dates. His eyes moved faster now. Scanning. Searching. Then they stopped. One line. Centered. A.O. Kandahar. Asset compromise. Dathan's fingers tightened on the plastic. The river noise faded for a second. Not gone. Just pushed back, like someone had turned the volume down inside his head. He flipped to the next page. Names. Call signs. Partial IDs. Not full records. Fragments. Enough to track. Enough to hide. His eyes locked on one. Mason R. Keller. Ethan didn't blink. The name sat there on the page like it had been waiting for him. Keller. Same squad. Same deployment. The guy who'd taken point the night everything went sideways. Ethan's thumb pressed harder into the plastic sleeve, creasing it slightly. Shadow shifted beside him. Ethan didn't look. He flipped another page. More names. Different units. Same region. Same note repeated in different forms. Compromised. Reassigned. Lost. But no KIA markers. No confirmation. No closure. Ethan's breathing slowed. Too slow. That quiet, dangerous kind of stillness that settled in before something broke. He flipped again. Photos. Printed. Grainy. Men standing beside crates that looked exactly like the ones inside the container. Desert background. Harsh light. No clear landmarks. Faces blurred in some. Deliberately. In one image, a crate sat open just enough to show contents inside. Medical supplies. Military issue. Black market reroute. Ethan's eyes flicked back to the container, then down to the documents again. Connections started forming. Not clean, not complete, but enough to see the outline. This wasn't lost cargo. It was redirected, hidden, moved. He flipped one more page. Handwritten notes this time. Short, sharp, not meant to be read by anyone outside. Asset extraction incomplete. Unit reassigned off record. Witnesses. Handled. Ethan's hand stopped moving. The word sat there longer than the rest. Handled. He stared at it. Didn't move. Behind him, Shadow's growl returned. Low, constant. Ethan finally looked up. The container. The open door. The dark inside. He listened. Nothing. But something felt different now, like the silence wasn't empty anymore. He set the documents down on the sand carefully. Not tossed, not dropped, placed, then reached for the crowbar again. "Stay," he said quietly. Shadow didn't move. Ethan stood, stepped toward the container. This time, he didn't stop at the edge. He stepped inside. One foot, then the other. The metal floor rang softly under his weight. Hollow, cold. The air inside felt thicker, heavier than outside, like it hadn't moved in a long time. The smell hit stronger now. Oil, preservative, and something else underneath. He raised the flashlight again, swept it across the interior. Left wall, medical crates. Right side, more sealed containers, stacked tight, secured with straps. The strap he'd seen earlier, still, not moving now. Ethan took one step forward, then another, 3 steps in. That was enough. He stopped, turned slightly, checking his exit. Door still open, light still coming in. Shadow's silhouette visible just outside. Good. He angled the flashlight deeper. The beam caught something near the back wall. A case. Different from the others. Hard shell. Black. Sealed tight with reinforced latches. Wedged between 2 larger crates. He moved toward it slowly. Each step measured. Each sound controlled. The floor creaked under him once. He froze. Waited. Nothing answered. He reached the case. Set the crowbar against the side of a crate. Knelt. Ran his fingers along the edge. Dry. No water intrusion. Protected. He flipped the first latch. Click. The sound echoed louder than it should have. He paused. Listened. Still nothing. Second latch. Click. Ethan exhaled slowly, then lifted the lid. Inside. More documents. But different. Clean. Organized. Not just manifests. Records. Photographs. IDs. He picked one up, a passport. Different name. Different country. Same face, another. Same. And another. Ethan's jaw tightened. False identities. Layered. Systematic. He set them back down. Careful. Then reached for a folder beneath them. Opened it. The first page. Operation logs. Coordinates. Dates. And then a line. Clear. Undeniable. Subjects not K. IA. Extraction rerouted. Records erased. Ethan's hand stilled. His eyes moved once more across the page, then back. Reading it again, slower, like maybe it would change. It didn't. Behind him, a sound, soft, but real, a shift, from somewhere deeper in the container. Ethan's head snapped up. The flashlight beam swung toward the back corner. Shadow barked outside. Loud. Urgent. Ethan grabbed the crowbar in one motion, rising halfway, body turning toward the sound. The strap moved again. This time, it didn't stop. The strap kept moving. Not fast. Not violent. Just a slow, steady pull, like something underneath was testing the limits of the restraint. The nylon stretched, fibers creaking under tension. Ethan didn't breathe. His body locked in place before his mind caught up. Crowbar raised. Weight shifted slightly to his back foot. Head angled just enough to keep both the moving strap and the exit in view. Shadow barked again. Louder now. Closer. Ethan didn't turn. "Stay back," he said, voice low. The strap jerked once, harder. Then, a thud from beneath the crate. Not shifting cargo, not loose equipment. Something alive didn't sound like that. Ethan moved. Fast. 2 steps back. Then another. He didn't run. Didn't rush blindly. Just created distance the way he'd been trained to. Clear the space, control the angles, never lose the exit. He crossed the threshold and stepped back onto the sand in one motion. Shadow moved in front of him instantly. Low stance. Teeth exposed now. The growl changed. Not warning anymore. Ready. Inside the container, the movement stopped. Just like that. Silence again. Ethan kept the crowbar raised. Waited. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing. Only the wind pushing through the open door, making the loose latch tap against the steel frame. Clink. Clink. The sound felt wrong now. Too light for what had just happened. Ethan lowered the crowbar slightly, but didn't relax. His eyes stayed on the opening. "Not cargo," he muttered. Shadow didn't break his stance. Ethan glanced down once at the documents still lying on the sand. The plastic sleeves fluttered in the wind, edges lifting slightly before settling again. He stepped over, crouched, and gathered them quickly. Not all of them, just the top few, the ones that mattered. The manifest, the photos, the page with Keller's name. He shoved them back into the canvas bag and zipped it halfway. No time to sort. He stood, looked back at the container one more time. Then he heard it. An engine. Distant at first. Low. Coming from the direction of the main access road leading into Fort Stevens State Park. Ethan froze. Head turned slightly, listening. Shadow's ears snapped toward the sound before Ethan even processed it. The engine grew louder. Not a truck, not a tourist car, heavier, controlled. Ethan moved fast now. He grabbed the bag and slung it over his shoulder. Left the crowbar where it was. No time. "Truck," he said. Shadow broke stance instantly and moved with him. They headed up the sand toward the gravel turnout. No running. Not yet. Just fast, steady movement. Ethan's boots hit the packed gravel as he reached the edge of the road. He slowed just enough to scan the approach. A black Chevy Suburban came into view around the bend. Clean. Too clean. No dust. No salt streaks. No bumper stickers like every other vehicle out here. The windows were tinted. Deep. Ethan stepped back into the shadow of a cluster of scrub trees, just off the road. Pulled Shadow in with a subtle hand motion. Stay low. Stay still. The Suburban rolled forward at a steady pace. Didn't speed up. Didn't slow down. Just moved. Until it reached the turnout. Then it stopped. Engine idling. Ethan's grip tightened on the bag strap. Shadow didn't move. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Mid-40s, maybe. Lean build. Dark jacket. No hat. No rush in his movement. He closed the door softly. Looked around. Not like a tourist. Not like someone lost. He scanned the area once. Calm. Controlled. Eyes moving across the shoreline. The trees. The empty road. Then, they landed on the water. On the container. Even from this distance, Ethan could see the shift in his posture. Recognition. The man took a few steps forward, hands in his pockets, stopped near the edge of the turnout, and stared out toward the red steel shape lodged in the shallows. He didn't seem surprised. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear. Recognition of a different kind. This wasn't random. The man spoke, not loud, but clear enough to carry across the wind. Didn't think it would drift this far. Ethan's jaw clenched. Shadow's growl returned, low and steady. The man turned slightly. Not fully. Just enough. His eyes scanned the tree line again. Closer this time. Searching. Ethan didn't move, didn't blink. The man's gaze passed over the trees, then shifted back to the water. He pulled something from his pocket. A phone. Checked the screen. Typed something, then lifted his head and spoke again, quieter now. "Yeah," he said. "It's here." Ethan's grip on the bag tightened. The wind shifted direction. Just slightly. Enough to carry scent. Shadow stiffened. The man paused mid-step, turned his head again, this time directly toward the trees, toward them. Ethan felt it. That moment, the one where stillness breaks. He moved first, not toward the road, not toward the man. Back. Deeper into the trees. "Go," he whispered. Shadow didn't hesitate. They slipped into the brush, branches snapping softly underfoot, despite Ethan's effort to stay quiet. He angled his path immediately. No straight line. Always change direction. Always break the pattern. Behind them, a voice. "Hey!" Sharp. Not surprised. Certain. Ethan didn't turn. He moved faster. The ground dipped slightly, uneven, roots hidden beneath wet leaves. He adjusted without looking down, feet finding balance on instinct. Shadow stayed ahead now, guiding. Left, then right, then down toward a shallow depression that cut through the trees. Ethan followed. No questions. Behind them, footsteps. Not running, but moving. Tracking. Ethan's breathing stayed controlled. In, out. Count it. 1, 2, 3. The bag bounced lightly against his side with each step. He tightened the strap, pulling it closer to his body. No noise, no loose movement. He angled again, cutting toward a narrow path that led back toward the outer edge of the park. If he could reach the truck, no. Too exposed. Too predictable. He changed direction mid-step. Shadow adjusted instantly. Good. They moved deeper. Away from the road. Away from the container. Away from the man who didn't belong here. The trees thickened. Light dimmed. The sound of the engine faded behind them, but the feeling didn't. Ethan slowed just enough to listen. Nothing now. No footsteps. No voice. Just wind through branches and the distant crash of waves. He stopped, turned, looked back through the trees. Nothing. Shadow stood beside him, chest rising and falling, ears still locked in the direction they'd come from. Ethan waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then a sound. Not behind them. To the side. A twig snapping, close, too close. Ethan's body dropped instantly. Low, silent. Shadow followed. No command needed. Ethan's eyes scanned the brush. Movement. A shadow shifting between the trees. Not rushing. Closing. He tightened his grip on the bag, adjusted his stance. Ready. Because now, they weren't alone anymore. 4:03 p.m. Ethan stayed low. One knee in the damp earth, one foot planted, weight balanced. The bag strap cut across his chest, tight. Shadow pressed close on his left side, body angled forward, eyes fixed into the trees. The movement came again. A shadow between trunks, not rushing, not careless. Whoever it was, they knew how to move. Ethan didn't wait to confirm. He shifted right, slow at first, then faster, using the slope of the ground to break the line of sight. No straight retreat, no predictable path. He cut across the grain of the forest floor, stepping over roots instead of around them, choosing higher ground where the mud wouldn't hold his prints as long. Shadow moved ahead. 2 steps. Pause. Look back. Guide. Ethan followed. Branches brushed his jacket. Wet leaves slapped against his arms. The smell of damp earth and pine closed in, thick and close, cutting off the river air behind them. Good. Less scent carried. Behind him, a footstep. Clear this time. Close. Ethan's pace changed. Not faster. Sharper. He angled left suddenly, slipping between 2 narrow trunks barely shoulder-width apart. Shadow slid through first. Ethan turned sideways and followed, the bag scraping bark for a split second. He kept moving. No pause. No glance back. 10 seconds. 20. The ground dipped again, sloping down toward a shallow drainage line. Water trickled through it, thin and muddy, cutting a narrow path through the trees. Ethan dropped into it without hesitation. Boots hit water. Cold. Good. He turned downstream, walking in the shallow flow, letting it carry away the noise of his steps. Shadow followed, paws silent even in the water, head low now, scanning. Break the trail, always break the trail. Ethan moved for maybe 30 yards before stepping out again, climbing the opposite bank and cutting right this time. Different direction, different pattern. Behind them, silence. No footsteps. No branches snapping. But that didn't mean anything. Ethan slowed. Listened. Nothing. He exhaled once. Controlled. Shadow stopped. Ethan froze. The dog's ears lifted slightly, head turning toward the direction they'd come from. Not panicked. Not aggressive. Tracking. Ethan crouched again, lowering his profile behind a fallen log. The wood was slick with moss, cold against his forearm as he leaned into it. He waited. 5 seconds. 10. Then, movement. Farther back this time, a figure stepping through the trees, partially visible between trunks. Same man, the one from the Suburban. Daniel Crane. Closer now. Ethan saw him clearly for the first time. No rush in his stride. No wasted motion. Hands free. Eyes scanning in a slow, methodical sweep. Tracking. Not guessing. Crane stopped where the drainage line began. Looked down. Studied the ground. Ethan's jaw tightened. He's good. Crane stepped into the water. Followed it. Exactly the way Ethan had. Shadow's growl returned, low and steady. Ethan placed a hand lightly against the dog's neck. Still. Shadow stilled. Crane moved along the waterline, then stopped again after about 20 yards. He crouched, touched the mud, then lifted his fingers, studying them. He knew. Not everything, but enough. Ethan shifted his weight slowly, preparing to move again. Not away, around. He pointed once, subtle, toward a narrow rise to their right. Shadow moved first, silent. Ethan followed, keeping low, using the uneven ground to mask his movement. The rise led to a thin trail, barely visible, likely used by maintenance crews or the occasional ranger. It sloped upward toward a service road. Better visibility. Worse cover. Ethan hesitated for half a second, then chose it anyway. Speed over concealment. They climbed. At the top, the trees thinned just enough to see through to the gravel road beyond. No vehicles, no movement. Good. Ethan crossed. Fast. Boots hit the gravel with a soft crunch. Too loud. He didn't stop. They moved across and into the next line of trees. Thicker, denser, darker. The light dropped instantly as they stepped under the canopy. Shadow slowed. Ethan matched him. Something changed. The dog's posture shifted, not alert toward the rear anymore. Forward. Ethan felt it too. That subtle shift in the air. Presence. Ahead. He dropped low again, hand tightening on the bag strap. Listening. A faint sound. Not footsteps. Metal. A soft click. Ethan's body reacted before his mind did. He dropped flat. Low, Shadow went down with him. A second later, a branch snapped. Not behind them. Ahead. Ethan's eyes moved slowly, scanning through the undergrowth. Then he saw it. Another figure, partially hidden behind a tree about 20 yards ahead. Not Crane. Different build. Larger, holding something low along his side. Not a weapon raised, but ready. Ethan's breath slowed again. In. Out. Two of them. One tracking from behind. One cutting them off ahead. Not random. Planned. Shadow's muscles tensed under Ethan's hand. Ethan leaned closer, whispering just enough for the dog to hear. Not yet. The figure ahead shifted slightly, adjusting position, trying to get a better angle. Ethan watched the movement, measured the distance, calculated. No clean escape forward. No safe path back. He looked left. Dense brush. Thick. Slow right. Slight opening. Downhill. Faster. Riskier. He chose right. Always choose movement. Ethan tapped Shadow once. Go. They moved. Fast. Breaking cover. Cutting downhill through the opening before either man could fully react. Behind them, a shout. Stop! Ethan didn't. Branches whipped past his face. The ground sloped sharply now. Loose dirt sliding under his boots as he pushed forward. Shadow ran ahead, weaving through the trees, never breaking stride. A second voice joined the first. Closer. Angrier. Ethan's breathing stayed controlled, even as his pace increased. No panic. Just movement. Get distance. Create space. Find cover. A sharp crack split the air. Not thunder. Not a branch. A gunshot. The sound slammed into Ethan's chest like a physical force. His body dropped instinctively, hitting the ground hard, rolling once before coming up on one knee. Shadow skidded to a stop, turning back toward him. Ethan's ears rang. The world narrowed for a second. Dust, heat, radio static, then cold air, trees, Oregon. He forced himself back. Back here, now, move, he snapped. They ran again. Faster now. No more quiet. No more stealth. Just distance. Behind them, footsteps. Closing. Because now, they weren't just being followed. They were being hunted. 4:11 p.m. Ethan didn't look back. Not after the second shot cracked through the trees. Not after the third. He kept moving downhill, boots sliding on loose dirt, one hand gripping the strap of the bag, the other out for balance. Shadow cut left. Hard. Ethan followed without thinking. Trust the dog. The ground leveled out suddenly. flattening into a narrow stretch of damp earth between clusters of brush. The air felt thicker here, heavier, less wind, less sound from the ocean. Good cover, bad visibility. Ethan slowed just enough to scan ahead. His breathing stayed controlled, but deeper now. Not panic, just load. Shadow stopped. Instant. Ethan nearly ran into him. The dog's body dropped low, ears forward, head angled slightly to the right. Listening. Ethan crouched beside him. Then he heard it. A metallic click. Not behind. Not beside. Ahead. Close. Ethan's body reacted before his mind caught up. He grabbed Shadow's collar and yanked him down. Both of them hit the ground just as, crack! The shot tore through the space where Ethan's chest had been half a second earlier. Bark exploded off a tree trunk behind them. Splinters rained down. Ethan didn't wait. Move! They rolled to the side, then pushed up and ran again, cutting sharply right through the brush. Branches tore at his jacket. One caught his cheek, slicing a thin line across his skin. He didn't feel it. Not yet. Shadow surged ahead, weaving through the trees in tight arcs, never staying in a straight line for more than a few steps. Zigzag. Unpredictable. Ethan matched him as best he could. Behind them, footsteps. Faster now, closer, and another voice. Cut him off! Ethan's jaw tightened. Two ahead, one behind. They were boxing him in. He changed direction again, cutting uphill this time. Harder climb, slower pace, but it gave him elevation and sight. The incline burned through his legs. His boots slipped once, twice before finding traction. He grabbed a low branch, pulled himself up the last few feet, and dropped behind a cluster of rocks at the top. Shadow slid in beside him, both of them still, listening. The forest held its breath. Then movement below, one of them. The larger man, moving fast, pushing through the brush without much regard for noise now. He thought he had Ethan pinned. He was wrong. Ethan stayed low, barely raising his head above the rocks. He tracked the man's movement, eyes following the line of approach. 10 yards. 8. 6. The man slowed, looked around, confused, lost the trail. Ethan's hand tightened on the bag strap. He could move now, slip past, break contact. But then, a second sound, behind him, too close. Ethan turned. Crane, standing maybe 15 yards back, partially obscured by trees, but close enough. Watching, not rushing, not shouting, just watching. He knew. Ethan's body went still, no good path left. Front blocked, rear covered. Shadow's growl built again, low and dangerous. Crane raised one hand slightly. Not a weapon. A gesture. Easy, he said, voice calm, steady. You don't want to do this out here. Ethan didn't answer. Didn't move. Crane took one step forward. Slow, measured. You found something that doesn't belong to you, he continued. That's all this is. Ethan's grip tightened. Shadow shifted, placing himself slightly in front of Ethan now, body angled toward Crane. Protective. Crane noticed. His eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Ethan. Good dog, he said quietly. But he's not going to change how this ends. Ethan's breathing slowed. Not fear. Focus. He adjusted his stance slightly, weight shifting onto his back foot. Ready to move. Ready to break. Crane saw it. Don't, he said. Another step. Closer. You're tired, Crane went on. You've been running. You're hurt. His eyes dropped briefly to Ethan's bandaged hand, the blood seeping through again. You don't know what you've got there. Ethan's voice came out low. I know enough. Crane smiled. Not friendly, not amused, just a small shift at the corner of his mouth. "No," he said. "You don't." Behind Ethan, a branch snapped. The second man, closing in. Ethan's options collapsed down to one. Move. Now. He didn't think. Didn't hesitate. He shoved Shadow to the side and broke left, diving past the rocks, sliding down the slope on loose dirt and leaves. His shoulder slammed into the ground once, hard, but he rolled through it, pushing back up to his feet. A shot cracked behind him. Too high. He kept moving. Shadow caught up instantly, matching his pace, cutting ahead again. Downhill, toward lower ground, toward the sound of water. Ethan angled that way. If he could reach it, mask the noise, break the trail again. He burst through a line of brush and hit a narrow stream cutting through the forest. Not deep, not wide, but enough. He stepped straight into it. Cold slammed up his legs. He didn't stop. He turned downstream and moved fast. Water splashing now, no longer quiet, no longer careful. Behind him, voices. Closer again. They were keeping up. Shadow surged ahead, then stopped suddenly. Ethan nearly collided with him. The dog turned, looked up, toward the trees. Ethan followed his gaze, and then he saw it. The edge of the forest, the land beyond, a narrow clearing, and beyond that, the coastline. Open, exposed, nowhere to hide. Ethan's chest rose once, fell. He looked back over his shoulder, then forward again. No cover, no time. Shadow looked at him, waiting. Ethan nodded once. Go. They broke from the tree line, into the open. Wind hit them immediately, sharp and cold. The sound of waves crashed louder now, filling the air. The sky had darkened further, clouds rolling in low over the water. Ethan ran. No more angles, no more stealth, just speed. Behind him, footsteps hit open ground. They were still coming, because this wasn't over, not even close. 4:22 p.m. The wind hit harder out here. No trees, no cover, just open coastline stretching along the edge of Fort Stevens State Park, waves crashing against dark sand and broken driftwood. The sky had dropped lower, clouds rolling thick and fast from the west. Ethan ran along the shoreline, boots sinking slightly with each step. Too exposed, too loud. Shadow cut ahead, then veered inland again, angling toward a cluster of jagged rock formations that rose out of the sand like broken teeth. Ethan followed. No hesitation. They reached the rocks in seconds. Ethan slid behind one, dropping low, chest heaving now despite his effort to keep it controlled. Sand clung to his wet jeans. Blood from his palm had soaked through the gauze, leaving dark stains on the fabric. Shadow stayed upright, scanning. Ethan leaned his shoulder against the rock, forcing his breathing down. In, out. Count it. 1, 2, 3. Behind them, footsteps hit sand. Closer. Ethan didn't look. Not yet. He listened. Different now. Slower. They weren't sprinting anymore. They knew he had nowhere to go. Shadow shifted. Head turned sharply to the left. Ethan followed the movement. There. A narrow cut in the rocks, barely visible unless you were looking for it. A path leading up toward a higher ridge overlooking the coast. Elevation. Better sight. But exposure. Ethan made the call. He tapped Shadow once. They moved. Up, fast. The climb was steep, loose gravel and sharp edges underfoot. Ethan used his free hand to pull himself up, gripping cold stone, ignoring the scrape across his knuckles. Halfway up, a sound, not behind, not beside. Inside his head, rotor blades, loud, too loud. The sky flashed white. Ethan froze mid-step, For a second, he wasn't on the Oregon coast anymore. He was back in dust and heat, crouched behind a broken wall, radio crackling, someone shouting coordinates he couldn't quite hear. Shadow barked, sharp, right in his ear. Ethan blinked. The gray sky snapped back into place. Cold wind, salt air. He moved again. Forced it. Up the ridge. At the top, the view opened wide. Ocean to the left, forest to the right. The broken shoreline stretching out in both directions. No cover. But now he could see. 2 figures below. Crane. And the larger man, spreading out, cutting angles, not rushing. They didn't need to. Ethan stepped back from the edge. Shadow stood beside him, body angled toward the slope they had just climbed. Ethan scanned the ridge. Nothing. Just rock. Wind. And... wait. Something else. Faint. A shape further along the ridge. Partially buried. Ethan moved toward it. Slow. Careful. It wasn't natural. Too straight. Too clean. A metal edge. He brushed sand away with his boot. Revealed more. A rusted hatch. Old. Military. Ethan's breath slowed again. Different now. Not panic. Recognition. He crouched. Ran his hand along the metal. Cold. Familiar. The edges were worn, but the shape. He knew it. Shadow moved closer, nose low, sniffing along the seam. Ethan's mind shifted. Not fully here anymore. Not fully gone either. Somewhere between. Flashback came in pieces. Not full scenes. Fragments. A coastline. Different ocean. Different war. A temporary LZ cut into rock and dirt. Supplies dropped in under cover of night. Containers moved fast. Hidden. Buried. Hidden again. Ethan's hand tightened on the hatch. "This," he muttered. Shadow looked at him. Ethan didn't finish. He didn't need to. The pattern was there. Same structure. Same concealment. Different place, same method. Shadow pawed once at the edge of the hatch. Then stopped. Looked up. At Ethan. Waiting. Ethan exhaled once. Then pulled. The hatch didn't move. Rust held it in place. He shifted position, planted his boots, and pulled harder. Nothing. He grabbed a rock, used it as leverage against the edge. Pride. The metal groaned. Then gave. Just a fraction. Enough. He wedged his fingers in and pulled again. The hatch opened with a long, scraping sound, sand and rust falling away as it lifted. Below, darkness. Ethan angled his body, peering down. A narrow shaft, maybe 4 feet deep. Then, a cavity. Storage. Empty now. But not long ago. Marks along the interior walls showed where crates had been stacked. Same size, same shape, as the ones in the container. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked back toward the shoreline. The container sat where they'd left it. Red. Visible. Obvious. Too obvious. This was where it was supposed to be. Hidden. Not drifting. Not random. Moved. Lost. Then found again. Shadow growled. Ethan turned. Crane had reached the base of the ridge, looking up now, watching. Not surprised, not even concerned, like he'd just confirmed something he already knew. Ethan stood slowly. The wind pushed against him, stronger now, tugging at his jacket. He looked down at the hatch again. then back at the container, then at the men below, pieces locked together. Too clean, too deliberate. Shadow stepped closer, pressed against his leg. Ethan's hand rested briefly on the dog's head. Grounding. Then, a realization hit. Not loud, not dramatic. Just there. Solid. Shadow had led him here. Not by accident. Not by chance. The dog had changed direction earlier, pulled him off the straight path, brought him to this ridge, to this hatch, to this memory. Ethan looked down at Shadow. "You knew," he said quietly. Shadow didn't move, just held his gaze. Ethan nodded once, then looked back at Crane. The man raised his voice just enough to carry. "You're standing on something that doesn't belong to you." Ethan didn't answer. His hand tightened on the bag strap. Crane took a step forward. "Drop it," he said. "Walk away. You live." Ethan glanced once more at the open hatch, then at the container, then at the documents in his bag, then at Shadow. The dog's ears were forward, eyes locked, waiting. Ethan exhaled, slow, measured, because now he understood something he hadn't before. This wasn't just about what was inside the container. It was about what had been taken, and what someone didn't want found. He stepped back from the edge of the ridge. Shadow moved with him. Crane's voice followed. "You don't know what you're holding." Ethan stopped. Just for a second. Turned his head slightly. "I know enough," he said. Then he moved. Not down the ridge, not toward the container, but away. Deeper along the coastline. Because the fight wasn't here. Not yet. And he wasn't done running. Not until he chose where to stop, 4:39 p.m. The wind cut sharper now as Ethan moved along the upper ridge, boots striking uneven stone, breath steady but deeper with each step. Below him, the Pacific churned dark and restless, waves slamming against the rocks in heavy rhythmic bursts. Shadow stayed tight to his right, closer than before. Ethan noticed. The dog's gait had changed, just slightly. A fraction slower on the rear leg. Not enough to stop, but enough. Ethan didn't say anything. Not yet. They pushed forward another 100 yards along the ridge before Ethan dropped down behind a broken concrete slab, remnants of an old military structure, half buried and weathered by years of salt and wind. He checked the time. 4:41 p.m. He hadn't checked it in hours. Felt like days. Shadow circled once, then settled low, still facing back the way they came. Watching. Always watching. Ethan pulled the bag off his shoulder, set it down between them. For a moment, he just stared at it. The zipper was half open. Sand clung to the fabric. A dark smear of blood ran along one edge where his hand had slipped earlier. He wiped his palm on his jeans, then opened it. Inside, the waterproof pouch, the files, photos, coordinates, names. He pulled them out slowly, laying them flat against the cold surface of the concrete. The wind tried to take them. He pinned them down with his hand. A photo slid free. Ethan caught it, held it up. The image was faded, but clear enough. A group of men. Gear on, dust in the air. A burned-out structure behind them. He knew that place, didn't want to, but he did. A.O. Kandahar. Same marking as the file. Same day. Same unit. Ethan's jaw locked. His thumb traced the edge of the photo. One face stood out. Not because it was clearer, because it shouldn't have been there. A man listed as KIA years ago. Buried, Closed file. Finished. Except, he wasn't dead. Not in this photo. Not in the records Ethan held now. The paper beneath it shifted. Another page. Coordinates. Shipment logs. Transfer points. Dates that didn't line up with official reports. Ethan flipped through them faster now. Each page tighter than the last. More connections. More gaps. More lies. Shadow shifted beside him. A soft sound. Ethan looked over. The dog had lowered his head slightly, licking at his front leg. Ethan leaned closer. There, just above the paw, a thin line of red. Not deep, but fresh. Ethan's hand moved instinctively, checking the wound. Shadow didn't pull away, didn't flinch, just watched him. Ethan pressed lightly around the area. No broken bone, no major damage. But the dog's breathing had changed. Subtle, faster. Ethan exhaled slowly, reached into the side pocket of the bag, pulled out a small roll of gauze, old, partially used. He wrapped the leg carefully, tight enough to hold, loose enough not to cut circulation. Shadow stayed still the entire time. Didn't look away. When Ethan finished, he rested his hand briefly on the dog's neck. Solid, warm, alive. Then he went back to the papers. One document caught his eye. Different, printed cleaner, newer, a financial sheet. Numbers lined up in neat columns. Ethan read them once, then again, then slower. Total estimated value, $2,300,417.82. He stared at the number, didn't react, didn't blink. Just held it there in his mind. That amount. It wasn't abstract. It meant things. A place to sleep that wasn't the back of a truck. Medical care that didn't get delayed. Food that didn't run out. Quiet. Peace. Ethan's hand tightened on the edge of the paper. The wind shifted again. Cold. Sharp. The ocean roared below. For a second, the sound twisted, changed, turned into something else. A blast. Dirt lifting. Heat slamming into his chest. Voices shouting, "Contact front!" Ethan blinked hard. The ridge snapped back into focus. Gray sky, cold air, shadow beside him, ground him. Stay here. He exhaled slowly, then looked back at the number. $2,300,417.82. He could take one file, one name, one piece, sell it, disappear. No one would know, no one here cared, no one would look. His fingers hovered over the papers. Didn't touch. Shadow shifted again, lifted his head, watched Ethan. Not judging, not questioning, just there. Ethan reached into the bag again, pulled out a lighter. Cheap, scratched, barely working. He flicked it once, nothing. Twice, a spark. Third time, flame. Small, unsteady in the wind. He held it under the corner of one document. The paper darkened, curled, then caught. Flames spread fast across the edge, eating through the printed lines, the names, the numbers. Ethan watched it burn, didn't move to stop it, didn't look away. Shadow didn't either. The fire died quickly. Wind took most of it. What remained was ash, black, fragile. Ethan crushed it under his boot. The rest of the files, he folded them carefully, placed them back into the pouch, zipped the bag. His hand stayed there a second longer. Then he pulled out his phone. Old, cracked screen, Signal weak. He moved slightly higher on the ridge. Checked again. 1 bar, enough. He scrolled, found the number. Didn't save it under a name. Didn't need to. He pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, a voice, Portland field office. Ethan didn't hesitate. "This is Ethan Cole," he said. "I need to report something. It's about a shipment, military, off the books. I have documentation." A pause. Short. Then, "Sir, where are you located?" Ethan looked out over the coastline, wind pulling at his jacket, Shadow standing beside him, watching the horizon. "Near Columbia Memorial Hospital Access Road," Ethan said. "Off Highway 101. I'll move there." Another pause. Then, "Stay where you are. Agents are en route." Ethan ended the call, slipped the phone back into his pocket. He didn't stay. He picked up the bag, adjusted the strap, looked down at Shadow. "You ready?" he said quietly. Shadow stood. Weight shifted slightly on the bandaged leg, but steady. Always steady. Ethan nodded once, then turned toward the inland path, toward the road, toward whatever came next, because the running was over now. He was choosing where to stand. 5:06 p.m. The inland trail narrowed as it climbed toward the service road that fed into Columbia Memorial Hospital. The air smelled different here. Less salt, more asphalt, distant exhaust, the faint trace of antiseptic carried by the wind. Civilization. Close. Ethan slowed. Not from exhaustion, from awareness. Open ground ahead. Bad place for contact. Shadow stayed tight at his side. Gait uneven now, but controlled. The bandage had darkened slightly, a thin line of blood seeping through, but the dog didn't falter. Didn't complain. Didn't stop. Ethan noticed. He always did. The trail curved left around a cluster of scrub and low brush, opening toward a gravel access road that cut up from Highway 101. A faded sign leaned at an angle nearby, half covered in moss. Maintenance access. Authorized vehicles only. Ethan stepped off the trail, paused, listened. Wind, distant traffic. Nothing else. He moved forward. 2 steps. 3. Then, Shadow stopped. Hard. Body rigid. Ethan froze. The dog's head turned slightly, not toward the road. Behind them. Ethan's hand moved instinctively, dropping low, weight shifting. Then he heard it. Footsteps, measured, not rushing. Crane. Ethan didn't turn, didn't give the position. He stepped forward instead, toward the road, toward the open. Because if contact came, he wanted space, not trees, not blind corners. The gravel crunched under his boots as he stepped onto the access road. The sound felt too loud, too exposed. Shadow followed, closer now, almost brushing his leg. Ethan moved to the edge of the road, using the slight dip of the shoulder as partial cover. His eyes scanned the tree line across from him. Nothing. But that didn't mean... A voice cut through the air. End of the line. Ethan turned. Slow. Crane stood at the edge of the trail they'd just exited. No rush. No weapon raised. Just there. The second man stepped out behind him. Wider stance. Hands lower. Ready. Ethan's body shifted slightly, placing himself between them and the road. Between them and Shadow. Crane took a step forward. "You made the call," he said. Not a question. Ethan didn't answer. Crane nodded once like he expected that. They won't get here in time, he added. Ethan's eyes flicked briefly down the road. Empty, still. Shadow's growl built again, louder this time. Crane glanced at the dog, then back at Ethan. You're carrying something that people have died for, he said. You think a phone call changes that? Ethan's grip tightened on the bag strap. The wind shifted again, carried a distant sound. Faint. Engines. Far off. Not here yet. Crane heard it too. His expression didn't change, but his stance did. Slightly. More direct now, more intent. Last chance, he said. Ethan exhaled once. Slow. Measured. Then he moved. Not forward. Not back. Sideways. Low. Breaking the line. The second man reacted first, stepping in, trying to cut him off. Too slow. Ethan dropped his center of gravity and drove through the gap, shoulder clipping the man's side just enough to throw off balance. Momentum carried him forward. 2 steps. 3. A hand grabbed his jacket from behind. Hard. Ethan twisted, pivoting on his left foot, using the pull to turn instead of fight it. His free hand came up fast, striking the man's wrist. Release! He broke free. Shadow lunged, not at Crane, at the second man, teeth locked onto the forearm. The man shouted, trying to shake him off. Shadow held. Ethan didn't hesitate. He moved past them, toward the road, toward distance. Then, a sharp crack split the air, closer than before. Ethan turned. Shadow. The dog staggered, released, dropped to one side. Ethan's world narrowed instantly. Sound muted. Vision tunneled. He moved back without thinking. Dropped beside the dog. Hands searching, finding. Blood. Dark. Spreading across the fur along the shoulder. Not fatal. Not immediate. But bad. Ethan pressed his hand over the wound. Pressure. Stop the bleed. Shadow's breathing was fast now, sharp, but his eyes, still locked on Ethan, still aware, still there. Ethan's jaw tightened. Crane stepped closer, weapon raised now, no more pretense, no more running, he said quietly. Ethan didn't look at him, didn't answer. His focus stayed on Shadow, on the pressure, on the breath. Then, another sound, different. Engines. Closer now. Fast. Crane heard it. Turned his head slightly. Down the road. Ethan looked too. 2 vehicles. Dark. Moving hard up the access road, gravel kicking up behind them. No hesitation. No slowing. Crane's expression changed. Just a fraction. Enough! The second man pulled back, clutching his arm. Blood from the bite running down to his hand. Go, he snapped. Crane hesitated. 1 second, 2, then stepped back, lowered the weapon. Not surrender. Calculation. They moved. Fast. Back toward the tree line. Gone in seconds. The vehicles roared closer. Brakes hit hard as they slid to a stop maybe 15 yards from Ethan. Doors opened. Voices. FBI. Don't move. Ethan didn't. Couldn't. His hands were still pressed against Shadow's wound. One of the agents approached carefully, weapon lowered but ready. Sir, are you Ethan Cole? Ethan nodded once. Dog's hit, he said, voice low, steady, through the shoulder. No exit. The agent crouched beside him. Another moved to secure the area. EMTs are on the way, the first agent said. Ethan didn't look up. Didn't ask questions. Didn't explain. He just kept pressure on the wound. Shadow's breathing slowed. Not steady, but holding. Barely. Ethan leaned closer, forehead almost touching the dog's. "Stay with me," he said quietly. Shadow didn't move. Didn't need to. He was still there. And for now, that was enough. 6:12 a.m. The room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of a monitor. Soft beeps. Even. Measured. Ethan sat in a chair that didn't quite fit him, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely together. The overhead lights in room 214 at Columbia Memorial Hospital hummed faintly, casting a pale glow over everything. He hadn't slept. Didn't try. Across from him, Shadow. Lying still on a stainless steel recovery table, bandaged clean across the shoulder. IV line taped carefully along his front leg. The fur around the wound had been shaved, revealing stitched skin beneath layers of gauze. The rise and fall of his chest was slow, but steady. That was enough. Ethan leaned back slightly, eyes tracking that movement. Up, down, up, down. He counted it without realizing. 15 breaths, then another 15, then again. The door clicked softly. A nurse stepped in, checking a chart before glancing up. "He's stable," she said quietly. "Bullet passed clean. No major arteries hit. He got lucky." Ethan nodded once. Didn't say anything. The nurse studied him for a moment, then set a small paper cup on the side table. "Pain meds," she added. "For you, hand looks rough." Ethan glanced down at the bandage wrapped around his palm. Blood had dried through in thin lines, stiffening the fabric. He hadn't noticed. He picked up the cup. Set it back down. "I'm fine," he said. The nurse didn't argue, just nodded and left. The door closed again. Silence returned. Ethan leaned forward, resting his forearms on the edge of the table. Close enough now to hear Shadow's breathing without the monitor. Closer. More real. He reached out, resting his hand lightly against the dog's neck. Warm. Alive. Shadow's ear twitched. Small. Almost nothing. But there. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, then loosened. He stayed like that for a long time. Not moving. Not thinking. Just there. 7:03 a.m. A knock. Different this time. Firm. Controlled. Ethan straightened slightly. "Come in." Two men stepped inside. Suits. Plain. Clean. One older, one younger. The older one held a folder. "Mr. Cole," he said. "Special Agent Harris, FBI Portland Field Office." Ethan nodded. Didn't stand. Harris didn't seem to expect him to. "We secured the container," Harris continued. "Your call helped us move fast. We've got teams working it now." Ethan's eyes flicked once toward Shadow, then back. "Crane?" he asked. Harris paused. "Gone," he said. "For now." Ethan didn't react. Didn't expect anything else. Harris opened the folder, pulled out a document, set it on the table. "Those files you brought in," he said. "They're real. Bigger than we thought. Multiple agencies involved now." Ethan glanced at the paper. Didn't pick it up. Harris watched him for a second, then added, "You did the right thing." Ethan's hand rested on Shadow's neck again. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Harris closed the folder. "We'll be in touch," he said. "There's going to be follow-up. Protection, if needed." Ethan nodded once. The agents left. Door closed. Quiet again, 8:16 a.m. Sunlight broke through the clouds outside, thin at first, then stronger. It filtered through the blinds, casting narrow lines across the floor and up the side of the table. Ethan stood, slow, stiff, walked to the window, looked out. Astoria stretched below. Wet streets, early traffic along Highway 101, the river beyond catching the light in broken reflections. Normal. Everything looked normal. Ethan stayed there for a moment, then turned back. Shadow's eyes were open, just slightly, watching him. Ethan walked back over, stopped at the table. "You're not done yet," he said quietly. Shadow didn't move much, just blinked once. Slow. Ethan nodded. "Yeah," he murmured. "Me neither." Weeks passed. 6 of them. The weather shifted. Storms rolled in and out along the coast, then cleared again. Ethan didn't go back to the truck. Didn't need to. A caseworker from the VA had shown up 2 days after the incident. Paperwork followed. Appointments, evaluations, not easy, not fast, but moving. Room 214 became a different room, then a different building, then outside again. Shadow healed slower than Ethan wanted, but he healed. The scar stayed, a line across the shoulder, hidden beneath fur but always there, a reminder. One morning, late November, 6:48 a.m. Ethan stood on the Astoria Riverwalk, the same place where the rope had snapped, where everything had started. The air was cold, clear, the river calm. Shadow stood beside him, stronger now, weight balanced evenly, eyes scanning the horizon out of habit more than need. Ethan held a cup of coffee in one hand. The receipt, still tucked in the sleeve, read $4.17 from a small shop on Commercial Street. Small things, normal things. He took a sip, looked out over the water. No containers, no movement. Just the tide, coming in, going out. Ethan exhaled slowly, then reached down, resting his hand against Shadow's neck. The dog leaned into it, just slightly. Enough. Ethan looked ahead. Not back. Not anymore. Because some men survive the war and carry it with them. Others find something that pulls them out. Something that doesn't leave. Something that stays. He glanced down at Shadow, then back to the horizon. Not fixed. Not finished. But steady. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. What would you have done in his place? Sometimes it doesn't look like a victory. Not a medal. Not a headline. Just a man standing by the water, one hand resting on a dog that refused to leave him behind. The rope snapped. The gunshots faded. The money burned. What stayed was a choice. Not to take what wasn't his. Not to become what broke him. There's a quiet kind of strength in that. The kind you don't see unless you're looking for it. Because people carry things you'll never hear about. War doesn't always end when the uniform comes off. And healing doesn't come loud. It comes in small moments, like a dog opening its eyes, or a man deciding to stay. Dignity isn't given, it's protected. Loyalty isn't spoken, it's lived. And sometimes, the difference between who we were and who we become is one decision, made when no one is watching. So if you ever pass someone who looks like they've been through more than they can say, don't look away. You don't know what they chose not to become. If this story made you believe that every person deserves to be seen with dignity, comment one below. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe and stay with us for the next one.